Hey friend, thanks for listening. We're all about equipping you to pursue real friendships. You were not created to be alone because life is just better with real friends. Let's get started. Hey friend, welcome back. Here we go.
Back.
This is our second podcast. I should stop saying that.
Episode numero dos.
Episode dos. All right?
Yeah.
Huh? Okay, cool. All right. This podcast, we're going to have the topic's going to be, okay, dude, what's the point of friendship? Why are we talking about
Why
this?
focus on friendship?
Yeah, I mean,
who even cares?
Do we need friendships? Does
No.
it really matter in
No
our
friends.
life? What is the point? Why are we focusing on this? Why are we wasting our energy on friendships?
Yeah, so let me give you guys one story as maybe a way of kind of illustrating this point. So part of my one of the many things I do in any given day or week, I work as a workplace chaplain. So I get paid to go on site at a company in Fargo here and literally just walk around and talk with people. And the company pays us to do this because they care about the mental health of their employees. So we're there to be a listening ear. We have conversations with people, and just, if they have something they need to get off their chest, we get to talk with them about it. Sometimes we'll get a call and we have to, go up in the evening at the night shift when someone's having a mental breakdown, or we have people who are just struggling with relationship stuff or whatever. So we're there to listen, to talk, and to hopefully, Lord willing, help people. That's one beautiful. Of the things, it's a really cool job, and I enjoy it. But one of the things I commonly ask when I'm just walking around talking with people, kind of easy conversation starter, is, how's your work day going? Or if it's near the end of the shift, I'll ask people, what do you have planned after you're done with work? Anything going on? And usually in those conversations, I'll end up asking someone, what, do you have friends? Do you have people you usually hang out with? What do you do in your downtime? And it's amazing to me how frequent the response I get is essentially, I go home, I eat some food, I watch TV, I go to bed. And then I wake up and I come to work and I do the same thing the next day. And that's basically all I do. That's the normal response. I'd say, I'm just making up a number here. I haven't actually tracked this, but it's probably 97, 95+% of the people I ask give an answer along those lines. So vast majority of people, their life looks like, I work, and the people who I would count as friends are the people that I work with, but I don't really hang out with them after work. I just go home and watch TV, watch Netflix, go to bed. And that is not a healthy thing. We are not, as human beings, created for that kind of life. We're created for purpose, for relationship, for knowing and being known. And this isn't just anecdotal. In a little bit, we'll start sharing some stats from studies and research that has been done that really point to the fact that isolation, loneliness, lack of friendship it's a crisis in the world that we are in. So that's a story by way of starting out. Here's the framework to answer the question in a more direct way of why friendship, why launch Hey Friends, why have conversations and create tools and do some equipping around having real friendships. There's really three things. One, friendship's fundamental. It's a key fundamental part of what it means to be human. You're going to have friends in life, hopefully. You were created for it. You're meant to have relationships. It's fundamental. It's also an urgent need. Like we're going to talk about more here. We'll give you some more data to back that up. And third, it's something that everyone needs. Not everyone. I'm married. Lucas, you're single. I don't.
You have to say that out loud. Right?
I don't need a wife. I have 3 kids with a 4th on the way, like I mentioned in our last episode. I don't need more kids in my life. If God brings us more children, awesome. But those are relational slots that I already have. So I'm not in. Not everyone needs another conversation about marriage. Yep. There's plenty of good stuff out there on that, but there's not really a whole lot of conversation happening, at least from the research we've done out there, practically on what does it mean to develop real friendship. There is stuff out there, but not a whole lot. So it's an urgent need, and it's fundamental. It's something that everyone needs as well. So let's dig a little bit more into that. Lucas, why don't you talk a little bit more about what we mean when we say that friendship is fundamental?
I think we have to look at what God says, right? Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, I think we've brought this up already before. I mean, Adam was alone, and God said it's not good for men to be alone, right? Yeah. So he created a helper for him. He created someone else for him, right? Yeah. And then you look at the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's a communal thing right there, right?
Yep.
And so there's also that, right? And then you also look at throughout the Bible, multiple verses that talks about, hey, two is better than one, right? Where two or more are, there I am. Scripture talks about it constantly. And so isolation, like, what is the worst punishment in jail? Like, what is the worst, right? What do they put you when you're in trouble? You've done something horrible in prison. Where do they put you? They isolate you, right?
Solitary confinement.
Yeah. That's the worst punishment you can give a human, So it's not, scripturally talks about it constantly throughout the Bible. Hey, we were never created to be alone.
Yeah. So that's fundamental. We'd say it's both biblical and practically. It's also an urgent need, like we already mentioned. There's a dramatic decline in friendship. Some of the research I've been doing, there was one author who called it that we are in a friendship recession. And so here I'll actually read a couple things. Here's the friendship recession piece. He's talking specifically about, this is particularly acute among adult males. So this is a 2021 study conducted by the American Enterprise Institute, suggests that the proportion of people who can name 6 close friends has dropped from 55% to 27% since the 1990s. And the number of people who say they have no close friends has risen from 3% to 12% from the 1990s to today. And here's the last one I'll mention from this specific study. 1 in 5 single men say that they do not have any close friends, while only 59% of Americans say that they would have what they describe as a best friend. So 60% of Americans saying, we maybe have friendships, we have relationships, but no one that it would be a best friend, no one that knows us really intimately and deeply. Parallel to that, right, this is kind of the inverse. There's all sorts of research that's been done, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, on loneliness. Right, COVID, obviously, 2019 to 2022, still impacting today, obviously was a big spike in people's loneliness and isolation. So there's been a bunch of studies that were kind of sparked through that. Interestingly, relatively recent study on loneliness found that, actually, I'll ask you this. Let's see, what age group do you think is the most lonely?
18 to 24.
You got it. Yeah. You also probably you cheated and you looked at the notes for this podcast episode. It's 16 to 24 actually was the block that they did. But interestingly, that was in this study where they were self-reporting how lonely do you feel, how frequently do you feel lonely. This study of 55,000 people by the BBC, British Broadcasting Company, said that 40% of 16 to 24-year-olds feel very often lonely, which is compared with 27% of those who are 75 and up. So there's higher levels of loneliness among young people across cultures, across countries, across genders. And COVID obviously increased that for a lot of people. And here's the thing, that those aren't just like abstract statistics that are like, oh, I feel lonely, so I want to feel a little bit better. The reality is loneliness impacts a whole bunch of things. So it's not just a like abstract need. It also has, when you're feeling lonely, you are actually more likely to get sick. You're more likely to die earlier. You're more likely to just have basically all these risk factors. There was one study I was reading. They said someone who is significantly lonely, actually here, I'll just read the quote. This is from another BBC one. Read just the quote itself. But the evidence is clear that if you are someone who is lonely and isolated, your chance of suffering a major long-term condition such as coronary heart disease or cancer is also significantly increased, to the extent that it is almost as big of a risk factor as smoking. So if you're someone who is consistently lonely and isolated, it's as bad for your health as smoking is, which obviously we know there's been plenty of stuff that's come out. Smoking is not great for you. There's plenty of people who do it, but it's not good for you. So this is not like an abstract, like, oh, this is just so people feel a little bit better. When you are lonely, when you're isolated, when you don't have real friends, it has real tangible health benefits, societal impact, and all this stuff. That's why we got to talk about friendship.
As you read out those studies and as you say those numbers, sometimes even to us it's like, oh, that's just a number. No, those are real human beings, right? Those are real people. and that person might be you, right?
Yeah.
So when we're saying that, when we're reading that, it's like, man, I would think on my side, it's like, well, Lucas, you don't feel what I'm feeling. I'm hurting. I'm still alone. You telling me this doesn't help my situation at all, right?
Yeah.
And
Now
that's
I just feel worse because I'm isolated, and now I might as well be smoking.
yeah. And the point is like, hey, go first then, right?
Yeah.
Go bring someone in your life, ask for help, or hey, specifically, I know we hope that if you're not a believer, that man, you stay in this podcast. This is also just for you too, but we're talking to believers too. Go to your church, right? Your church. I don't think the church has done a great job helping people do life together, right? And that's what the church is supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's what the church is, right? That's the body. It's not a building; it's the body, right? So we tell you this not to make you feel bad or not to shame you or anything like that. Say, hey, we see this too. That's what we're saying.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, man. Where do you see? Let's see if we can put some skin on those numbers. Where do you see loneliness impacting people, individuals, in those around you or in your own life?
As I would talk, I'm going to talk to the men first, right? Ladies go through the same thing too. I'm going to talk to the men here. I feel like as men, we're like, oh, we're not going to talk about our problems.
Yeah.
We're not going to be vulnerable. We're not going to be real. We're not going to there's no intimacy, friendship. Like, no, we're not doing that, right? That's what's killing you right there, right? Yeah. I always pray, and I heard this prayer. It's such a beautiful prayer. It's like, Lord, give me a tough skin, but also give me a tender heart, right?
Yeah.
It's like, let things that are tough or things that someone says to me, like, let it roll over my skin, but give me the tender skin too. Tender heart.
Yeah.
And I see with men a lot, guys that are struggling with pornography, guys that are struggling with a lot of different stuff. Guys that are just like, even, we think romance or romantic relationship is going to solve a lot of things. Us as guys, I've lived this life in college life. I lived the life of like, oh, bring a bunch of girls home, do all these things, and it doesn't fill anything, right?
Yeah.
And you need real friends that hold you accountable, right? I'm not saying you say the hard things, say the things that builds that person up, right? Like the friends that, I'm going to get back to your question here. The friends that we know of this world, like who I follow on social media, who who I know at work, and things like, no. We're talking about deep, real, meaningful friendship, biblical friendship, right? So I see with men, and I also see with even, I hate to go after the church too, but the church hasn't really helped with just like, man, we go to church, it's just a Sunday thing, and that's it. It's like, how can I have real conversation? The person I go to church with, right? How can I become good friends? How can I do in church? How can we do church every single day too? I'm not saying it's always easy. I'm not saying it's always happy and sunshine. No. Like, how do I also go through the real stuff with someone else, right? So those are two things I want to highlight. It's like, how do we help men specifically? I know they're struggling with this of being isolated and pretending to be someone that they're not. And also, how do we help the church to say, all right, how do we help the whole body? A healthy body is dealing with the healthy, real stuff too, right? It's not always healthy if you're not dealing with real stuff. It's not always healthy if you're not saying the hard stuff. It's not always healthy if you're just saying things to make everyone else comfortable, right? So, and you look at the suicide rate, right? It's like people can blame it on a lot of different things. People can blame it on technology. But these people are doing it alone too, right? It's like, man, you matter. You need someone to see. If someone's struggling, man, the best thing we can do is just be there and show up, right?
Yeah.
And just to walk with them. Hey, I know you're here. I know you're here. Let me walk with you. Let me sit with you, right? And I think we're so easy to fix things too. It's like, oh, let me fix that. No, just show up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'll give one illustration maybe of this. There was a young guy that I was talking with not too long ago, who was in town, started going to college for the first time. It was interesting. I'm a fairly extroverted person, but he had been going to the college he was attending for it was probably 3 weeks or so, and I'd asked him if he had made any new friends or like talked to anyone in his class. And this is like 3 weeks in, so several days of classes by that point, hopefully. And his response was, "No, not really. I haven't really talked with anyone." And I was just stunned by that. Like, cause I remember my first like month of going off to college, and I made a whole bunch of friends and, had conversations with a whole bunch of people, not necessarily that they were going to be like my best friends or deep relationships, but I was familiar enough with like the people that I was sitting near that I would sit down and have conversations with them. And this guy I was talking with, he's much more introverted than me, but I feel like that, we had a little bit more conversation about that, and he talked about how so many of the people on campus are just on their phones or have their headphones in, which just kind of inherently shuts out relationships with people, right? If you have headphones in, you're sending the message to the people around you, I don't want to be talked to, whether that's your intent or not. That's what you're doing. Yeah. And that, for me, that was like, oh man, this like for people who are entering college, their experience is so much different than mine. I'm not that old. I'm only 35. So I've been out of college for a while, but that's a pretty big difference to say, man, my experience has been, I've been almost a month at college, no friends versus jumping right in and making a whole bunch of new relationships in that place. And that's anecdotal. But I think of his story, the story of the people that I'm talking with regularly in my chaplaincy work and the other college students and young adults, and even my day job is coaching college and young adult ministry leaders. And it's amazing to me how many of them are lacking real deep relationships as well. Even though that's their job is to have relationships with people, they maybe have lots of relationships with people that they're investing in, pouring into, pastoring and leading, but they don't have real friendships with people who are their peers, with people that are asking them hard questions and doing life with them.
Yeah. And sometimes as we're talking about this, of like, we're not saying have a lot of friends. Mm-hmm. We're saying have a deep, meaningful friendships with someone, right? Whether that's one person, whether that's two people. I think less is always better, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, you're not God. You can't have deep, meaningful friendships with everyone. You can't solve everyone's problems. Yeah. You can't be there for everyone. Well, no, what we're saying is like, no, have that friendship and have that deep. Mm-hmm. I think depth matters more than having a lot of friends. So.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about some specific stuff like that in upcoming episodes. Things like, man, what is maybe the ideal number of friendships, or how do you have those deep friendships, or move from having these shallow conversations with someone to a place where, okay, now we're opening up the reality of who we actually are to each other. So here's one. I want to read this. This is one more thing from a study that I came across. This is, I didn't jot down the names of the folks. We can maybe include some of those details and links and stuff in show notes, but two of the collaborators on the world's longest running study on happiness summarized their findings this way. And basically, essentially their findings were like, man, if you want to have a happy life, you have to have relationships. They said this: relationships keep us happier and healthier throughout our lifespans. We neglect our connections with others at our peril. Investing in our social fitness is possible each day, each week of our lives. Even small investments today in our relationships with others can create long-term ripples of well-being. So these guys, I think it was like 25 plus years that they were studying, tracking with this cohort of people, tracking their happiness. And the ones who were by far and away most happy through their lives were the ones who intentionally invested in friendships and relationships throughout the course of their life. So worth working on.
I've seen that too. So I went to Dallas. I have some couple of friends down there, and there was these guys that were invested in me. They're a lot older than me, and they're doing life together, right? And I believe there's 3 of them I got to meet with. There's a total of 4 of them, right? 3 of them I met with, and they all live in the same neighborhood. Yeah. You might think that's weird, but no, I think that's beautiful, and I hope that one day that my friends that I'm really close with, the guys that are doing life with me, we get to have the opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. Not that's okay, but that's not what establishes our friends. That's not the case. But I saw that, and one of the guys, we were gonna go get lunch, and I was like, "Lucas, you ride with me." I was like, "All right," and I got to know each one of them, but this one I haven't met yet, right? And his story was so beautiful. Him and his wife were going through some hard stuff, right? Yeah. And he started bringing this stuff to the guys. He's like, "Hey, we're struggling. Here's what's happening." And it was, he had the divorce papers right front of him, right? And the guys just stepped up and said, "We're not going to let you do this, right? We're not going to let you do this."
Yeah.
What they started doing right away is just started loving them. And they called out things that his life. It's like, I was being an idiot, dude. I was doing things that, man, I was being selfish. I was being prideful. I wasn't loving her. You know, it was all about me. And God really used these guys to speak into my life, to show me things that I didn't see. All my like spots that I had. Some of the things I knew I was doing, but some of these things I had no clue that I was doing. And guys like some of the guys like, "What are you doing, man?" So they just started loving him. They started loving his kids. They started coming around more, right? I mean, they thought they're all together close enough, but no, they were really that season. They just loved him and his family. And it was such a beautiful thing. Like, God really used these guys to save my marriage.
Wow.
And it's such a beautiful thing. And they've been doing life together for a long time.
Yeah.
These guys are all successful. These guys are doing some big things. And it's just cool to see, like, and now their sons, they're all in college, right? Their sons are doing life together.
Wow. That's
Is
crazy,
that not,
man.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that's the impact of real friendship when it lasts over the long haul.
It's such a beautiful thing.
It is. Well, you got any last words before we wrap up?
Whether you're 8, whether you're 80, you need people in your life. You need real people that know your soul, the things that you're struggling with, the things that you need people just to be there with you, good, the bad, all the times. You need people in your life. And there's this verse in John 15, verse 13. Jesus says this, before he goes on the cross, he says this. He's like, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." Like, man, Jesus calls us friends. And it's such a beautiful thing. So you need people in your life. And we hope that the Lord uses this ministry to equip you to pursue real friendship. We hope that your church, talk to your pastor about this. Talk to someone about this. Hey, here's where I'm struggling. Let someone in. That's all we're asking. Or an old friend that you may know that, hey, this person's following the Lord. We believe that friendships are like-minded, and I'm not saying they're all exactly alike, but hey, they're pursuing Jesus. Someone that's in the faith. Call them up and say, "Hey, I just want to let you in." And it might be weird. It might be weird right away. It might be awkward because you're both are not used to having these real conversations. And I'm not saying it always has to be bad too. There's also cool things. Hey, I just got this big promotion. Hey, I just graduated grad school. Hey, I just went through this. Like, hey, I have no one to celebrate with. Yeah, my family's there. Yeah, my spouse. Like, I want friends to also celebrate with too. So, and by all means, we're not saying all those other relationships are not important. They are important, but they are not the same as friends. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, friends, thanks for joining us.
All right.
Catch you next time.
We love you. Follow Jesus today, and we'll see you next week. Peace.